This is the story of Pericles of Athens, the statesman who shaped a city into an empire, and who may have quietly rewritten its past to protect his own power. His age is remembered as golden, filled with marble temples and brilliant thinkers, yet beneath the glow stands a darker question. Did Pericles manipulate the laws, the treasury, and even the story of Athens itself to secure his place in history? When Pericles rose to prominence in the 5th century before Christ, Athens was restless and ambitious. The Persian Wars were recent memory, and the city had emerged scarred but proud. Citizens gathered in the assembly, believing their democracy was the envy of the world. Pericles understood that pride better than anyone. He knew how to speak to it, how to turn it into thunderous applause. He came from a powerful family, connected to old aristocratic bloodlines and guided by the philosopher Anaxagoras. Yet he presented himself as the champion of the common citizen. His voice was calm, controlled, never rushed. It was said that when he spoke, the city listened as if a single mind had settled over the crowd. Soon he proposed a change that seemed harmless at first. In 451 before Christ, a new law restricted Athenian citizenship to those born of 2 Athenian parents. The measure was praised as a defense of identity, a way to protect the purity of the city. It passed with support, and Pericles stood as its architect. Yet the law had a personal cost. Pericles himself had married a foreign woman before, and many of his allies had ties across the Aegean. Why would he limit the circle so sharply? Some whispered that the law strengthened his political base by reducing rivals and reshaping who counted as a citizen. It was reform, yes, but also calculation. At the same time, Athens led the Delian League, an alliance formed to guard against Persian return. Member cities contributed ships or silver to a common treasury kept on the sacred island of Delos. The arrangement sounded equal, a shared defense among allies. But gradually, tribute flowed more like taxes, and ships were replaced with coin. Then came a decision that still unsettles the story. Pericles moved the league's treasury from Delos to Athens itself. Officially, it was for safety, to guard the funds against threat. In practice, it placed vast wealth under Athenian control, inside its own temples and vaults. The allies protested quietly, but the silver remained in Athens. Soon construction began on the Acropolis, on a scale never seen before. Marble blocks rose toward the sky, sculptors carved gods from stone, and the Parthenon began to take shape. Pericles declared that Athens, as leader, deserved to adorn itself in glory. He argued that as long as the city defended its allies, it could spend as it saw fit. Critics accused him of using allied tribute to beautify his own city, turning shared defense funds into monuments of Athenian pride. They claimed he had transformed an alliance into an empire without ever naming it so. The marble gleamed in the sun, but beneath it lay coins sent by distant cities that had little say in its use. Pericles defended the spending with bold confidence. He said Athens owed no accounting to those it protected. He insisted that greatness required visible proof, that future generations would measure their courage in stone. The assembly agreed, and the hammers kept striking. Yet the question lingered: was this leadership or quiet domination? As Athens grew more magnificent, it also grew more feared. Some allied cities attempted to leave the league. They were met with force. Rebellions were crushed, walls torn down, tribute increased. Pericles rarely appeared in armor himself, yet his policies shaped each campaign. He stood behind decisions that tightened Athens' grip. Then came the shadow of Sparta. Tension between the two powers had simmered for years, but in 431 before Christ it erupted into the Peloponnesian War. Pericles urged a cautious strategy. He ordered Athenians to abandon the countryside and retreat behind the long walls, letting Spartan armies ravage the fields while the fleet struck at sea. It was a strategy of endurance, not glory. Citizens crowded within the city walls, farms abandoned, livestock lost. Pericles insisted it was the only way to outlast Sparta. Yet the concentration of people inside the walls created something no general had planned for. Disease began to spread. The plague arrived like a whisper and became a roar. Fever, thirst, delirium, death in the streets. No sacrifice stopped it, no prayer slowed it. Bodies piled high, and faith in leadership faltered. Pericles watched as the city he had fortified turned into a prison of sickness. Some accused him openly. They said his strategy had trapped them together, that the walls meant to protect had become instruments of disaster. The assembly fined him, stripped him briefly of command. Yet even then, his influence did not vanish. He returned to power before long, as if the city could not imagine itself without him. During the plague, something else occurred that still unsettles the story. The same man who had tightened citizenship laws found himself in need of an exception. His legitimate sons died in the epidemic. Only a son by Aspasia, a foreign woman, remained. Suddenly, the assembly granted special citizenship to the boy, the law that had defined purity bent for Pericles' bloodline. Officially, it was compassion in tragic times. Unofficially, it was power at work. The restriction that excluded countless others dissolved for one child. Was it grief, or proof that the law had always been a tool rather than a principle? Aspasia herself stood at the edge of scandal. Intelligent, foreign, influential, she was blamed for shaping Pericles' thoughts and even for encouraging war. Comic poets mock her, enemies attacked her character. Pericles defended her fiercely. But the accusations fed a sense that unseen hands guided the city's course. Pericles delivered his famous funeral oration during the war, praising Athens as the school of Hellas. He spoke of freedom, courage, and the beauty of democratic life. The words have echoed for centuries. Yet even in that speech, he avoided naming the cost of empire, the allies compelled to pay for that shining vision. As the war dragged on, doubts grew. Some wondered whether Pericles had misjudged Sparta, believing sea power alone would suffice. Others whispered that his pride in Athenian greatness made compromise impossible. Peace proposals flickered and vanished. The conflict hardened into a struggle neither side could easily end. Pericles did not live to see the war's final ruin. He died during the plague, weakened by illness and grief. His passing left a vacuum, and new leaders would guide Athens toward harsher choices. Yet his shadow lingered over every decision, over every stone of the Acropolis. In later years, Athenians would look back on his era as a golden age. The Parthenon stood radiant, tragedies filled the theatres, philosophers debated in shaded courtyards. It seemed impossible that such brilliance could conceal something darker. But empire often wears the mask of culture. Allied cities remembered differently. For them, tribute was not a gift but an obligation. Athenian clerics settled on the lands, garrisons enforced compliance. Pericles' name was tied to policies that reshaped their autonomy. The league that promised defense had become a network of control. Was this transformation inevitable, or was it guided deliberately by one steady hand? Pericles never declared Athens an empire outright. He spoke of leadership, of responsibility, of destiny. Yet actions can build realities words refuse to admit. The treasury move, the monuments, the crushed revolts, each step carried weight. Even the marble of the Parthenon hides questions. Inscriptions and accounts survive, but not every ledger is complete. How much silver flowed from distant islands into those stones? How many dissenting voices were drowned out by applause in the assembly? Records tell of votes, but not always of pressure behind them. Pericles' enemies accused him of arrogance, of ruling not as a citizen among equals but as a prince within a democracy. Yet the system remained formally intact. Citizens still voted. Magistrates still rotated. It was a rule by influence, by persuasion, by the shaping of choices until only one path seemed wise. The plague stripped away certainty. As bodies burned on improvised pyres, faith in the gods faltered. Some said the disaster was punishment for hubris, for spending sacred funds on marble and gold. Others saw only random cruelty. Pericles, once so composed, reportedly wept in private. If he doubted himself, no record preserves the confession. The speeches that survive show confidence to the end. They speak of courage, of endurance, of faith in Athens' destiny. But speeches are crafted things. They reveal what a leader once remembered, not what he fears in silence. After his death, the war continued, spiraling into brutality and miscalculation. Athens would eventually face defeat, its empire shattered. Looking back, some blamed successors for abandoning Pericles' cautious strategy. Others argued that the path to ruin had been set long before, in the quiet decision to move a treasury. The Golden Age endures in memory, polished by admiration. Tourists still gaze upon the Parthenon and think of vision, of art, of democracy at its height. Yet beneath those columns lies the unanswered tension between ideal and control, between freedom at home and compulsion abroad. Pericles left no written confession, no admission of hidden motive. He left stone, law, and reputation. Was he the guardian of democracy, or its most skillful manipulator? Did he elevate Athens for its own sake, or for the permanence of his name carved into history? In the end, the mystery does not rest in how Pericles died, but in how he ruled. When a democracy builds an empire and calls it leadership, when laws bend for those who crafted them, when beauty is paid for with another city's silver, who truly commands the story of greatness?